How Arsenal nullified Manchester City. Today we're going to be diving into the tactics, doing some analysis, and of course looking at some statistics. I'm of course Statman Dave. If you are new around here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But anyway, let's get this party started. So let's start talking formations and then I'll move on to the first thing that Arteta nullified in-game. Arteta's becoming one of the best in-game tacticians there is around, and a number of changes really impacted this result for Arsenal. So in terms of Manchester City, they set up with a usual back four, with Rodri at defensive midfield, with one of the eights dropping in on the ball, and one of the eights staying a little bit higher. At times, both eights would attack and force Arsenal to drop a little bit deeper. The width was held on both sides by Salvino on the right-hand side and Jeremy Doku on the left-hand side, and Haaland being that advanced forward through the middle. In terms of issues that this Manchester City team creates for you is that you've got to deal with 5 attackers. That, of course, being the 2 free eights, with a lot of free movement. What you'll tend to see in the final third is Bernardo Silva and İlkay Gundogan or Kevin De Bruyne, whoever's playing in central midfield, getting into those inside positions. So the big thing when playing Manchester City is controlling these 2 eights. If you can control these 2 eights, you start to nullify what Manchester City do. Of course, there's situations where you've got to go 1v1 with their wingers, but also creating a 2v1 in those situations helps as well. In terms of Arsenal, they set up in their standard 4-4-2 defensive shape. Kai Havertz with Trossard as a 2-man strike force, a midfield 4 of Saka, Rice, Partey, Martinelli, and of course a back 4 of Calafiori, Gabriel, Saliba, and Jurrien Timber. In terms of how Arteta dealt with these free eights in the opening part of the game, he very much went man for man. Declan Rice picked up İlkay Gundogan and pressed him all over the pitch, and Thomas Partey sat on Bernardo Silva. This is a strategy that has worked for a number of managers over the years versus Guardiola, but it's not my favourite method. I think the big concern when you're playing like this is that you're dropping that kind of defensive midfielder into the back line, which creates space on the inside, and this space can be used either by one of the wingers cutting inside, by maybe one of the fullbacks moving into that area, but it creates a situation that causes uncertainty in the back line. And Arsenal in fact conceded the first goal in a kind of similar way to that, where Partey got dragged and then Arsenal were opened up. So taking a look at that opening goal, we can see Arsenal in their 4-4-2 defensive structure. Havertz and Trossard looking to put pressure on the ball when it's ready. Of course, they allowed City to have possession at certain times. You know, in this instant, they've kind of backed off Rodri, they've allowed in the ball, but they're blocking the passes into the feet of the 2 free eights. You can clearly see here that Declan Rice is picking up İlkay Gundogan and Bernardo Silva's dropped deep, so he's kind of allowed to be a free man in build-up. In terms of how the players progress in this situation, first up they hit İlkay Gundogan to feet. Again, that causes a situation where Arsenal have to react and Declan Rice steps out. I thought that Arsenal's central midfielders and of course Kai Havertz in that second half were so good at timing those moves of when they needed to pressure the ball. But this is just a little example of how they were exposed before Mikel Arteta nullified the Manchester City right-hand side. So in terms of the ball getting recycled around the back, Rodri again in possession, Kyle Walker receiving into feet. But now just notice that Gabriel Martinelli is the player putting the pressure on the ball to Kyle Walker. That changes in a little bit. So of course Walker receives, Martinelli pressurises him on the ball, but the key thing off the ball, look how Thomas Partey's getting pulled by Bernardo Silva. This is when you're going man-to-man on City's free eights. Not my favourite strategy. My favourite strategy is exactly what Arteta did and what Unai Emery did with Aston Villa last season. So as the play kind of progresses, there's a ball outside to Savino, and this is a situation where you don't think there's much issues right now. You've got Calafiori that can put pressure on the ball. You know, you've got Haaland in a 2v1 with both your centre-backs, and again, Thomas Partey's picking up Bernardo Silva. The issue comes is when Calafiori isn't quite touch tight. Again, this is like feet away from his man, and consequently of that previous action we mentioned before, of Bernardo Silva pulling Thomas Partey out of the way, it creates a bit of a situation that Arsenal don't really react well to. So Salvino cuts inside, Partey's too deep to put pressure on the football. You've basically opened up yourself in that defensive midfield position, an area that you don't want to open yourself up in. Savino cuts inside, a massive channel is created, you've got a massive overload, you've got a ball out wide to Doku, you could find İlkay Gundogan, but again, the smart ball is to Haaland. The space between the 2 centre-backs is too big, again, because of the amount of threat that City have got on the back line. You know, Saliba's got to be aware of whether Ilkay Gundogan's going to make the run as well as Haaland. Savinho simply slips the ball through, Haaland finishes first time. Big problems for Manchester City. Tracking those attacking midfielders man-to-man was a big problem. And if we take a look at that from a tactical perspective, pulling the left back over, receiving a ball from Kyle Walker into his feet, and then spinning inside from Savinho, the issue that you've got is you're basically cleared out, and there is such a clear line for you to cut inside and drive across and then look for that through ball. In the opening 25 minutes of the game, Bernardo Silva and Savinho completed 3 of their 4 dribbles. This is interesting because after the change that Arteta made, that was completely nullified. So let's talk about the first change. I think it was around 25 minutes, Arteta changed it. And instead of Thomas Partey being the man tracking the free 8, on this right-hand side, we saw a lot more of Gabriel Martinelli in a defensive position, which again, I think helped out in a number of ways. Number one, you allowed this situation where if Bernardo Silva was deep, you had a 2v1 on Savinho. You had both Calafiori and Martinelli dealing with the Brazilian winger. Again, a 2v1, a good situation. You got an extra body, very difficult to beat those 2 players. But I think later on in the game, what I really liked as well is Calafiori sat inside and Martinelli arguably as a bit of a left wing back. This is something, as I mentioned, that Unai Emery did when Aston Villa played Manchester City last season. Dropped his winger into a sort of a wing-back position and picked up the inside free 8 with the fullback. Again, you got man for man. This is the big thing with Manchester City. They really try and overload your backline 5v5. But the way that Arteta dealt with this was absolutely perfect. So let's have a look at a few examples of this tactical tweak. So we pick up the play just on around 25 minutes with Manchester City on the ball deep in their half. There's some slight tweaks to this system. So before, as we mentioned, Martinelli was pressing Kyle Walker. That has now changed to Leandro Trossard, and Arsenal pressing more to the right-hand side, with Kai Havertz dropping from kind of left centre-back to right centre-back, it all coming across this the right-hand side of Manchester City's shape. As the ball's worked out wide, we can clearly see the new setup. We've got Martinelli in a deeper position, looking to trap Bernardo Silva, and Calafiori's moving out, with Trossard picking up Kyle Walker. What this allows you to do is you've got an extra man on the back line, but you've also got a man in central midfield, which means if Savinho wanted to cut inside now, Thomas Partey is going to block him with a tackle. And we clearly see the advantage of this as Savinho is pushed back. We can see this kind of new shape that Arsenal have got, the 2 forwards, a bit of a back 4, and of course Calafiori putting the pressure on more of a back 5, should we say, and a bit of interchange between Martinelli and Calafiori. Moving forward, again, we see a similar situation, the 4-4-2, but now as the ball gets switched over, Arsenal again go with a 2v1 on Savinho, really nullifying his threat in the final third. This is exactly what you want to do to stop attackers. Think how Everton have stopped Arsenal in the last year or so, where they've gone a 2v1 versus a Saka or a 2v1 versus Martinelli. Very difficult to beat 2 players as an inverted winger. But again, this was a benefit of the new shape and system. And as the half progressed, we saw Calafiori taking up that kind of almost left-sided centre-back role in a back 5, and Martinelli as a left wing-back, really dealing with the threat. Trossard put more pressure on the ball when Kyle Walker had it, and Kai Havertz pressed from that kind of left-hand side to the right-hand side. And Arsenal's defensive shape looked really good, and that first change really nullified Manchester City's right-hand side. And when we look at the statistics, again, something that we love to do on this channel, in the next 65 minutes of the game, Bernardo Silva and Savinho completed just 2 of their 9 dribbles, versus in that first 25 minutes, completing 3 of the 4, which again is a dribble success rate from 75% to just 22%. Again, allowing Arsenal to really nullify that threat of the 3-8, so not dealing with it with defensive midfielders, but very much dealing with it with your defenders plus your winger. Great tactics from Arteta and a real good way to get back into the game. Talking about getting back into the game, set pieces, a key part of Arsenal's repertoire. Since the start of last season, they've scored 25 goals from set pieces, which is more than any other side. And in fact, Arsenal don't really need a Haaland when they've got set pieces. I think on top of that, when you look at Gabriel, 16 goals since joining Arsenal, which is 5 more than any other defender has managed in the Premier League. But going further than that, obviously, we know that Mikel Arteta is a disciple of Pep Guardiola, but is he really? Or is he a disciple of Tony Pulis? A strong 4-4-2, 4 centre-backs at the back, and dominant from set pieces. But without further ado, let's start to look at those corners, because for me, they are pieces of absolute magic. So we've got two corners to look at, both with Gabriel getting a shot on goal. The way that Arsenal create these situations is absolutely brilliant, and a lot of credit to Nico Jova. In terms of this setup, we've seen Arsenal do this time and time again. They load the back post, they have Gabriel on the penalty spot, they have two players on the outside looking to win those second balls. But I think the big thing with the players on the back post is it creates a lot of problems and concern for the players at the near post. They need to be watching their zone, but also they need to understand if there's anyone that's going to attack their zone as well. But in terms of that penalty spot, this is where Gabriel absolutely thrives. I think there's a lot of things that make this Arsenal set piece really good. Number one, it's Gabriel being really dominant to create separation. His ability to spring off the mark and slip a marker is fantastic, and I'd say he's probably the best centre-back in the league at doing that. But as the set piece comes in, you want to look at a number of different things. First and foremost, it's both Calafiori and Thomas Partey attacking that central area to try and block or create separation for Gabriel to attack the ball. I think with a set piece, number one, the delivery's got to be good. The signalling's got to be good as well. We can see here the signalling Saka's arm going up, then arm going down. That's when the Arsenal players start to move. It's almost like poetry in motion. It's perfect. So the players start to attack that near post. You see Gabriel move straight away, be aggressive, be physical on Doku and explode on the outside. The delivery's got to be dropped into that certain area. But I think the big thing with this is just a few things to note from this point. You can see Calafiori is blocking Gvardiol's zone. You've got two players on the goalkeeper that aren't blocking and aren't being aggressive. They're just standing there. So they're not committing fouls, but they're being nuisances in that sense. Of course, that's usually Ben White's job. This time, William Saliba and Martinelli provided that option. And just look at Thomas Partey as well. He slightly creates a bigger zone by blocking Ruben Dias moving backwards. All these things create a big opportunity for Gabriel, and Arsenal should go 2-1 up. But let's move to the second corner. Of course, Arsenal do rotate, and Kyle Walker thinks he can be the man to stop Gabriel. Absolutely not. See, the way that Kyle Walker tries to deal with it is he's slapping him in the belly. He's trying to get into his head. He's trying to confuse him. But exactly the same things happen. Arsenal load the back post. The arm goes up for the signalling. The delivery is absolutely perfect. Gabriel creates himself a little bit of separation with Walker. The players attack that near post, and the same thing happens. Partey blocks Ruben Dias. Calafiori blocks Gvardiol, and both Martinelli and Saliba stop Ederson getting out to collect the ball. This all comes with a really good work. Again, check on his front foot from Gabriel, which pushes Kyle Walker's weight to his front foot, then explodes on the outside and simply attacks the back post with absolute aggression. Brilliant header, gives Arsenal the 2-1 lead. But this all comes from work on the training ground. Set pieces are very difficult to master, but Arsenal have absolutely mastered them under Jova. And that way of the signalling, delivery, Gabriel creating separation, blockers on the goalkeepers, blockers on the key zones in Gvardiol and Ruben Dias. It's a brilliant set piece. And it wasn't just corners that Arsenal got right. They scored their first goal from a free kick. Again, there's a lot of dispute whether the referee should have allowed Kyle Walker to get back into position. But for me, he's actually in a pretty decent position. Of course, he goes to the referee with Saka to talk about the foul, the tactical foul that probably should have led to a booking. But before the play's there, Walker is in a fine spot. Again, the complaining for Manchester City just seems like a bit of waffle to me. The ball over the top to Martinelli to get him behind. Walker's not in a bad position there. He's not in a bad position here, but he gets absolutely done by Gabriel Martinelli, who cuts back inside. The situation that Arsenal created here is they've basically, as you can see, they've pulled basically all of Manchester City's players, apart from Erling Haaland, deep into their penalty area, which creates these zones on the edge of the box for long shots, something that we're going to talk about a lot later on. And again, the ball's dropped out to Calafiori, and the finish is superb on his left foot. Calafiori is one of the best technical centre-backs in the world, or left-backs, whatever you want to say, technical defenders in the world, and that finish is absolutely superb. But again, comes from Arsenal, utilising set pieces quickly and looking at weaknesses to their opponents. Again, pushing the entire City team into their penalty box to create these long shot opportunities. So Arsenal were absolutely flying. They'd nullified Manchester City's right-hand side. They'd exploited set pieces and Manchester City's zonal system. And then the second booking from Trossard, which I think is very, very harsh. I think from the point of the referee blowing the whistle to Trossard challenging a 50-50, I just think it's ridiculous. I think there's a side where the referee needs to be a little bit smarter in that situation. It reminds me a lot of the Robin van Persie sending off versus Barcelona in the Champions League, where basically the action happens just after the whistle. Van Persie gets a yellow card. Similar things. So of course Arteta had a lot to do following that situation. How does he readjust? What does he do at half time? I like systems when you're down to 10 men of maybe still having a forward up the pitch, but I think having a back five or a back four is a real big question. Arteta of course went with a 5. We already spoke about how having 5 defenders really deals with City's threats. They have to throw even more bodies forward, or they have really flat possession, and that's the way the game went. So of course at half time, Bukayo Saka was sacrificed and Ben White was brought on into the team. And no, he didn't go at right back, he dropped in at right centre back, and Arsenal went to a back 5. One of the things that I kind of like when you've got 10 men is still having an attacking threat, still having a forward up the pitch to cause a little bit of threat. But Arteta went, no thank you. Diego Simeone 2021 away at the Etihad, we went with a 5-5 structure. Arteta went with a 4-5 structure in the second half, and quite frankly it worked an absolute treat. I think one of the best things about Arsenal's 5-4 structure was the spacing between the midfield and the defence was absolutely fantastic. When they were defending deep, there wasn't more than 7 yards between that defensive line and the midfield line. Very difficult to break that down and break through. But as well, what we saw in that first half, with Martinelli dropping a little bit deeper, at times Arsenal went to a back 6, with Martinelli again operating as a wing back, Calafiori tucking himself in to deal with Bernardo Silva, and of course the rest of the back 4 made of Gabriel Saliba, White and Timber. This was really good for me. I think this stopped Manchester City's threat. When they dropped deep as well, frequently what we saw, Arsenal camped outside, or camped inside their box, sorry, they were the defensive line, with all those centre-halves, going back to playing 5 centre-backs in these areas. Again, defensively very, very solid. Then the line of midfield 4 with Martinelli, and at times, as we mentioned, as the ball was worked out to, let's say, Salvinho on the wing, Martinelli would drop in and create another body. What I loved about this as well is we saw a lot of possession for Manchester City in terms of their kind of back 4 players. Rodri was taken off in that first half, Kovacic coming in, but what we saw frequently was kind of situations of Man City having balls in very non-threatening areas. You're thinking about Diaz or Akanji recycling possession outside the box and then taking long-range shots. That's exactly what Arsenal wanted to do. If any instances, let's say Bernardo Silva dropped off the line and received defeat, instantly Arsenal put pressure on the football, and that timing was fantastic. So let's have a look at a few moments where Arsenal got their shape bang on. So pick up the play just inside that second half, and we can clearly see the Arsenal structure. 5 at the back, 4 in midfield, no strikers. I mentioned before the spacing, very, very important. Obviously, the closer they got to their own goal, the tighter that got. But it basically gave City hardly any options to open Arsenal up. They were so compact and defensively solid. Kovacic in this situation doesn't have many options. Carrying the ball out, he's not going to draw anyone in. They're just going to drop. They're going to continue to drop. It's a method of opening up a low block is dribbling out and trying to pull a defender in that middle area of the pitch. But again, simply Arsenal dropped deeper and deeper. Then when they got to a certain area, then they jump out. When they got to their own defensive third, they jump out, put a little bit of pressure on the ball, and then, look to defend again. Ball gets worked out wide, a little bit of a 1-2 situation on Calafiori, and a cut back to edge of the box for Kovacic, but you're not creating a real good quality of chance. That's a low XG chance, and Kovacic, as much as he scored his bangers in his time, he doesn't have the numbers of a Phil Foden or a Rodri in terms of scoring goals from outside the box. And of course that little situation there needed to be nullified, and we saw it again in that first half with Martinelli dropping in a little bit deeper and Calafiori taking up Bernardo Silva. Again, great tactics from Arteta, really good. And this looked like a 6-3 shape. This is lovely. This is classic Jose Mourinho football. And look, Arteta, what I love about Arteta is he's got the ability to do this. He's got the ability to be pragmatic. One of the best coaches of all time was Sir Alex Ferguson. He was very pragmatic in big games. And I love that Arteta's starting to get this. Considering that they kept a clean sheet in Bergamo versus Atalanta, a clean sheet at Tottenham as well. And again, unlucky to concede 2 goals against Manchester City. But again, it frustrated City. What could they do? Nothing. Look for the ball in between the lines, instantly going to put pressure on it, going to force it backwards. Then you're going to get forced wide. That's absolutely fine. We've got a 3v3 out wide. Again, you're going to move the ball back into central midfield. And these types of positions was where City kind of lost the game. The makeup of this of being Kyle Walker, Diaz, and Akanji with Kovacic at certain times was the issue. For me, City needed to change at this point. So when we look at this as a tactical situation, it's very hard to break down a low block that's consisting of 6 or 5 defenders and a midfield 3 or midfield 4. But there are a number of key things that you can do to break down these situations. Number one would be providing an overlapping fullback. It's a classic way of breaking down a low block, receiving the ball, in a wide area, and now having a fullback on the overlap to then potentially get the ball behind the byline, pull the defenders back, and then you're looking for a cutback situation to grab a goal. Again, I thought Kyle Walker was very poor against Manchester City. What Pep Guardiola could have done was take off Walker and bring on Lewis. Lewis is a natural player. Again, he inverts from left-hand side a lot into midfield, but he's a natural player that can provide an overlap in the final third, which could have given City, a lot of joy in those areas. So that's the first thing that City could have done, had a fullback to overlap in the final third. Number two would be switching their wingers and playing on the natural side, having Doku on the right hand side and Savinho on the left hand side. What this means is you have a natural player that creates a yard and then get crosses into the box. Obviously Arsenal are happy to do that, but again, if your crosses is low from, just beating your man and whipping in it low, or alternatively getting to the byline and cutting the ball back, again, a massive way to open up these situations. Having natural footers on natural side would really help. Again, Savinho's delivery from that left-hand side at Girona last season and for Manchester City in the Premier League has been very, very good. Natural footers, getting balls into the box. Next little thing, switching the 8s around as well and going natural footers, natural side. That opens up. Again, we've got a natural right footer. You've got that little natural pass on the inside for the underlap, and again crossing first time into the penalty area as the defence is moving back. Another way of opening up the ball. I think that's a really good method as well. Alternatively, if you can create a little situation, by manipulating the ball to create a little pocket of space to get a natural footer maybe on the inside to then cross from that zone, allowing Haaland to run onto maybe the back post. Again, another reason why you have a natural footer on that natural side. But I think more importantly, what Manchester City should have done in that build-up shape and structure is get players that can shoot from range. Rodri and Phil Foden are 2 players that can do this. Phil Foden was a top scoring player from outside the box last season across Europe with 6 goals, and Rodri had 4. Of course, Rodri had gone off injured, but getting Phil Foden into these kind of deeper areas, when the ball had been maybe recycled, and allowing him to shoot from range, it's a real weapon for Manchester City, Foden from range, but he didn't have a situation, like we saw with Diaz maybe at times, where he was shooting from kind of central areas. Phil Foden never got into that position where he was in a central area from range, with a little bit of space. Again, Phil Foden only needs a tiny bit of space to get shots away. But there are methods to break the low block. We're talking overlapping fullbacks, we're talking natural wingers, we're talking natural 8s or natural free 8s with their foot on the right side, and also shots from range. But we've got to give credit to Arsenal. They were fantastic. Again, the stats that are coming out is that Manchester City had 28 shots in that second half versus Arsenal's only 1 shot. But in fact, if you look at the XG per shot, it was only 0.5, which is very, very low. Comparing to Manchester City's average of the season of 0.14, that is a massive reduction. Arsenal forced City to shoot from range with players that were maybe ill-equipped for doing that, or alternatively, there was a lot of blocks and a lot of poor shots from inside the box. But Arsenal and Arteta got it absolutely bang on and nullified Manchester City. Brilliant result for Arsenal. If they'd just hung on in the 97th minute, it would have been a humongous win. Kind of feel for Arsenal in a sense. It was the only time in the whole game where their midfield dropped a little bit too far, which opened up the shot for Kovacic just inside the penalty area, which led to the goal. But again, I thought Arsenal were brilliant. Arteta was brilliant. And we've got a absolute title race on our hands this season. But anyway, guys, I've been Statman Dave. If you're new around here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video. But anyway, thank you. See you later.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, why not check out some more content on the Statman Dave YouTube channel.